Poor old Bridget Archer. Her tell-all to the Sydney Morning Herald about how she is spoiling for a fight within the Liberal Party to drive it to the left betrays a wild imagination. At worst, a fudging of the numbers. She claims that she faithfully represents the values of the Liberal Party, despite the fact that she seems to land on the same side of the floor as Labor, the Greens and Independents more than any of her colleagues. Ms Archer says, "I don't think Menzies would be particularly disappointed with my efforts," close quote. Well, let's assess that critically. Menzies wasn't in favour of star chamber bodies that diminish the rights of the individual against the state, but she enthusiastically supported the federal ICAC, which does just that. She opposes parents having the right to choose a school for their kids that reflects their values, and has voted to take away the right of schools to run themselves and teach consistently with their values where it butts up against woke ideology. But Menzies was much more comfortable with parental rights and traditional values. Ms Archer's crossed the floor to vote against the cashless debit card, which stopped welfare being spent on pokies and booze. Menzies encouraged Australians to be lifters rather than leaners, particularly when on the taxpayer's dime. And Ms Archer happily erodes women's rights by supporting the place of trans people in biological women's spaces. This fiction wasn't even cooked up in Menzies' time. I could keep going, but I think you get the idea. Robert Menzies wrote in 1974, lamenting the presence of a people of similar ilk to Ms Archer in the party. He said, quote, "State executive is dominated by what we now call Liberals with a small l. That is to say, who believe in nothing, but who believe in anything if they think it is worth a few votes. The whole thing is tragic," close quote. And as for her assessment of the electoral imperative, well, like the super funds say, let's compare the pair. Ms Archer has a primary vote of 39.7%. Her next-door neighbour, with a very similar electorate of northern Tasmania, with a similar amount of city and country and similar socio-economic demographics, well, her neighbour, Gavin Pearce, in the seat of Braddon, has a primary of 44.1%. Ms Archer got a swing of -2% at the last election, but Mr Pearce got a swing of an additional 6.2% on his side. Ms Archer has a margin of 1.4%. Mr Pearce has a margin of 8%. There's a gap of some 8.8% between the two of them. And when you look at their beliefs and their methods applied in, as I say, fairly similar electorates, Archer is a rogue leftist and Mr Pearce is a conservative team player. Well, the results say it all, don't they? So, to be as generous as we possibly can be to Ms Archer, at best, her comments might reflect a couple of communities in the broad church that is Australia. But it's anything but the centrist approach she pretends to stand for. Let's call it what it is. It's the extreme left. And it's not a prescription for the future of the party. It hasn't even delivered the numbers she needs in her own seat. Well, that's all we need to know about whether or not her approach works. No doubt Ms Archer has delusions of leading a hard left-leaning version of the Liberal Party, and she wouldn't be the first parliamentarian to harbour such a fantasy. But a Liberal Party that's just a half-hearted shadow of the left would be doomed to opposition for the long term. The lesson? Well, perhaps Ms Archer should actually read a little more of Menzies' work.